All right, imagine you're standing outside your local gym, handing out a quick survey to people as they're walking out the door. Now, the answers you get from those folks, they might be incredibly accurate for that specific, highly active group of people. But here is the massive catch. Those answers tell you absolutely nothing about the broader population of your entire city. And that little gym scenario brings us right to the core question of today's explainer. How exactly do our collection and sampling choices determine what a dataset can actually represent? By the end of this, we're going to build a really practical mental model for how data is gathered and selected. Because once you see the mechanics behind the scenes, you'll know exactly when to trust the results and, when to take a step back and say, hold on a second.
Section 1. Understanding the core definitions.
To really get a handle on this, we've got to break things down into distinct pieces. Our first foundational term is population. In our world, the population is simply the absolute full set of cases that a specific question cares about. Think of it this way. Data collection defines what is actually recorded, while sampling decides which of those cases actually make it into your final dataset. Together, they shape exactly whose experiences and what conditions your analysis actually represent. Which brings us to our next big term, the sample. The sample is just the subset of cases that we actually observe and record from that target population. And here's the real kicker. A sample's usefulness doesn't just come down to its size. A million rows of bad data is still bad data. Its true value depends on its coverage, how cases were selected, how things were measured, and who didn't respond. Next, we have the sampling frame. Think of the frame as your operational list. It's the practical, real-world process you use to actually get to those cases. It's literally the bridge between the theoretical population you want to study and the actual sample you manage to get your hands on. And finally, selection bias. This is a systematic difference that happens directly because of how those cases entered your data in the first place. So just let those four terms settle for a second. Population, sample, sampling frame, selection bias. By nailing these down, we take what seems like a fuzzy concept and turn it into a crystal clear system. Section 2, the sampling mechanism. All right, now that we've the vocabulary, let's look at the engine itself. The specific path we take to gather data matters a ton. It's a four-step sequential path. First up, you state the target population. Who or what are we asking about? Second, you construct that sampling frame we just talked about, the operational way to reach them. Third, you draw your sample, meaning you actually select or recruit your cases using a method you strictly document. And fourth, inference. You measure the results, look for any missing coverage, and qualify what you found. These four stages are what seamlessly connect your raw starting point to your final computational result. Section 3, an illustrative worked example. Okay, let's ground this in reality. Imagine a college wants to figure out something specific. They want to estimate technology access among all of their students. But if their sampling frame, their input, is just the rosters from their online courses and they only email those specific students, well, they're systematically leaving out a massive chunk of campus learners. People without internet access probably aren't in the online class to begin with. The frame just completely misses the target population. So how do we fix it? The transformation here is to use a stratified sample. You sample across different learning modalities, like online, in-person, or hybrid, and enrollment intensities, like full-time versus part-time. This structural adjustment dramatically improves your coverage, but, and it's a big but, you still have to carefully review response differences, because who actually chooses to reply to your survey is a whole other layer to handle. The consequence here is absolutely profound. Your sampling design strictly controls what conclusions you can actually defend, and it does this before a single algorithm or machine learning model is even trained. We're using a compact example here so you can easily see the transformations, but trust me, in a massive real-world data project, the exact same conceptual logic applies. Section 4, misconceptions and decision rules. Let's pivot to some practical decision rules, because we need to establish a major boundary right now. There is a super common and frankly dangerous misconception out there that a large data set is automatically representative, but that's just not true. The more accurate view, a large biased sample can actually estimate the exact wrong population extremely precisely. Let me say that one more time. Selection quality matters just as much as quantity. Having a giant mountain of data doesn't magically fix a fundamentally flawed sampling frame. And we have to be completely honest about a big limitation here. Statistical adjustments can't fix everything.
You can run all the math you want, but unknown non-responses, severe coverage gaps, changes in how things are measured, and deep historical inequities, those can all remain stubbornly embedded in your data. These persistent gaps are exactly where mathematical results stop and where additional evidence and good old-fashioned human judgment become absolutely mandatory.
Section 5. Essential Byte Recap. All right, we've unpacked a pretty complex workflow today, so let's synthesize it into a quick retrieval framework. What is this all about? Data collection defines what is recorded, while sampling determines which specific cases actually enter your dataset. How does it work? It flows sequentially, population to frame to sample, and finally to inference. When does it matter? Always use probability sampling when drawing inferences about a population is important. And look, if using convenience data is absolutely unavoidable, you must rigorously document exactly who is missing from your set. You always need to keep that boundary of unknown gaps right in your line of sight. So as we wrap things up today, I want to leave you with one final provocative question to take back to your own work. In your very next data set, whose experiences will remain hidden behind the adjustments? This is Data Science Bytes. Complex ideas made clear.